I'm so excited to be able to show you these pear trees in such beautiful bloom. Just look at all the flowers. Not only are we enjoying them by just looking at them, the honeybees are all over them today, which will mean we'll have lots of pears. This is a kefir pear, and it's one that does well in this particular part of the world. It produces a very large, hard pear that's very good for canning. Now, these trees are very interesting in terms of their shape. The method of pruning here is called espalier, and this particular design is one called candelabra. And if you step back and you look at the pear tree, you can see that the branching does resemble a candelabra. Now, to achieve this, it takes several years of pruning. In fact, I do all of my pruning in late winter to make sure that this shape is maintained. Now, this is a really practical approach to growing a fruit tree, particularly if you have limited space, because you're essentially growing this fruiting tree on a single plane. This is a time-honored method of growing fruit trees. In fact, it was popular in colonial America. You can go to Martha and George Washington's Mount Vernon and see espaliered trees there in their food garden. You know, one of the things that I like to do as a ground cover underneath these espaliered trees is plant beautiful things such as tulips, but also practical things like strawberries and thyme and other herbs. With all of these flowers and honeybees pollinating them, we have the promise of a big harvest this year. We just have to remain hopeful that we don't get a late season cold snap that knocks all these blooms and tiny fruit off. Okay, enough about these pears. Let's step over here. I want to talk apples for a moment. Now, this variety of apple is a gala apple, but like the pear, it's in an espalier, and this form is called a cordon, where you have these four horizontal limbs going in opposite directions. Beautiful design. But as you can see, the apple is not quite as far along in terms of its bud, so those flowers are not as vulnerable to cold weather as we have with the pear. Now, I love apples, but the apple harvest is on the opposite end of the season. There's no reason why we shouldn't talk about them now. In fact, a friend of mine, Patrick Herron, does a magical job with apples with this time-honored dessert.
All right, we're going to do an apple tarte tatin today, a classic French dessert, which is basically an upside-down apple pie. First, we're going to start out with about 7 ounces of butter. This is a non-stick Teflon pan with a high edge on it so that you can get all your apples and stuff into it. We're going to take 3/4 cups of regular sugar and almost 1/2 cup of sugar in the raw. Not brown sugar, it's a little different. It's not as dark, not as molasses in flavor. We're going to let this develop into a little bit of a caramel sauce. And then we're going to layer in Golden Delicious apples, which we've peeled, cut into quarters, and then taken a little bit of the core. The caramel sauce will take about 5 to 6 minutes to set up. You don't want it to turn too brown before you add your apples, because you're going to cook your apples in the caramel sauce, which gives the apples a real rich flavor. So as soon as the sugar starts to melt and starts to turn color, you want to add your apples in. Right here, our caramel's starting to develop where the edge is getting brown. We're going to cut down the heat just a little bit. Okay, turn the heat down. And then we're going to layer the apples in one at a time, side by side, facing the same direction. And as these cook, the moisture coming out of them is going to form more of the sauce. But you want to get them in pretty tight. And this caramel is very hot and it will burn you. So it's okay to get them started in there as quick as you can. And then we can always come back and put more apples in them to tighten it up. And it helps if you cut part of the apple with the flat side. Helps it lay up a little bit easier. Already you're getting a good golden caramel color on the apples. And they will shrink a little bit, so you can stuff them in there as tight as you can before you put on the pastry crust. Okay, now that we've got our apples in there nice and tight, we're going to put the top on it. Cut your heat off. And this is called pâte brisée, which is basically pie crust with a little bit of sugar in it to make it sweet. We're going to fold it over and take the edges from the overlap. You want to overlap about 1/2 inch all the way around. You take the back of a wooden spoon or a utensil and push it down in, just to seal in a little bit of that caramel sauce. Cut a little chimney for it to steam to come out of. And then this is ready to go in the oven for about 30 minutes or until this crust is really golden brown. When that comes out, we'll show you how to flip it over and you'll have your apple tarte tatin.